All right. Well, as we continue on with the architecture of reality, I'm going to start talking now about the shift from the medieval understanding of the world being an integrated whole, of everything having a proper place created by God, that humanity had a nature that was given to them by God, and our job was to live into it more and more. And I'm going to spend some time talking about Machiavelli and his what came to be called realism, but it was a new way of using that word. And what Machiavelli taught was that society didn't have any sort of ontological nature. Society didn't have a proper way of organization. It was just in this shape because of the power that was given to it. One of the things that he argues is that we need to separate the way the church is run because it has a divine organization, and the rest of the world doesn't, right? So politics doesn't shouldn't be should no longer be listening to the church. Politics is a power game, and everything else is a power game. And so that he argues that we have to separate that kind of organization, that kind of society, out away from the church, because society doesn't have a proper order. It has an order that is grown out of who has the power. Well, what's interesting is that he's there in Italy, in Florence. He's making these arguments. Well, half a generation earlier, one of the most influential folks in Florence, where he was a man named Pico, and I want to read you. This is a section out of the English literature in the 16th century, and it says, Pico suggests that man has no specific nature at all, but creates his own nature by his acts. To thee, O Adam, are the words he puts into God's mouth. We have given no certain habitation nor countenance of thine own, neither a particular office, so that what habitation or countenance or office you choose for yourself, the same thou shalt enjoy and possess at thine own proper will and election. We have made thee neither a thing celestial nor a thing terrestrial, neither mortal nor immortal, so that being thine own fashioner and artificer of thyself, thou mayest make thyself after what likeness thou dost most affect. And that's from his book called On of Dignity, or On Dignity, the dignity of mankind. So, and now this is Lewis, the author, talking about that. No impassable barrier, then, cuts us off even from the highest spirits. I have already noticed that through Agrippa in one place, or though Agrippa in one place limits the power of our ceremonial to calling up the mundana numina, or even their inferior demons, in another he hints a more direct access to the perfection of heaven. Ficino seems to think the same. We are akin not only to the aerial demons, but to the highest orders of created things. No one seeing us as we now appear would suspect our almost limitless powers. But that is because souls in earthly bodies are wondrously abated of their proper dignity. So he says that our nature, he separates out our nature from our bodies, and instead centers it in the will, right? The will is the place where our nature is decided. And this doesn't immediately become popular for individuals, but it immediately becomes popular for the social order, right? So you begin having this growth of what comes to be called secular humanism, right? Because before this, you had you had all these people that called themselves humanists. Most of them were Christians, and the idea was that human flourishing was in and of itself a good thing, and that God's plan for the human race was to restore it either to its original dignity that it had lost or beyond, right? But that it was that was what God, the center of God's plan was restoring our humanity, putting right what we lost in the fall. Well, secular humanism is when the human aspects of our life are separated out from religion and made into a secular sphere, so that the secular sphere had a different set of rules than the religious sphere. And it begins with this metaphysical understanding. Now, what's really interesting about Pico is that he was a magician in practice, right? So he was trying to make these arguments to justify why it was that he is devoting himself to magic, right? To gaining power over nature, gaining power over the nature of things by means of magical incantations, by means of developing a knowledge of potions, right? He is a magician in practice, and so his argument is that mankind has unlimited possibilities through magic. Well, that doesn't catch on right away for individuals, but for society, this understanding that there is no nature, but that there's only power and who's willing to grab hold of the power and shape society into what it becomes, that does begin growing, right? So when Calvin is working in and the philosopher who develops that theory is Niccolo Machiavelli. Well, one of the first books that's written in Geneva by one of the elders in John Calvin's church, just to show how broad and influential it was a book entitled Against Machiavelli. Right? One of the lawyers who was also an elder in Calvin's church in Geneva did a series of lectures on why Machiavelli's take on society needed to be rejected in Geneva and everywhere, actually, but specifically in Geneva, because this growing idea, so Machiavelli's the very beginning of the 1500s, and so you see by 1600 or by the late 1700s, or by the late 1500s, that Machiavelli's ideas are growing and they're spreading all throughout Europe, that we can take a secular portion of society, right? So the church has to do its thing according to the rules of nature, according to the rules of the Bible, because it has a divine mandate for its existence. But he says the secular aspects of society run by a different set of rules because they don't have a proper nature. There's no ontological proper organization of mankind. That happens by power, right? So the church can do its thing according to its rules, but society runs by power, and it's shaped into what it becomes by power, right? So that's the big shift, right? The big change that happens. And it's not that what ends up happening is everyone starts to agree on the division. So you don't immediately begin getting people that say, okay, there's no rules for society, there's only power. But they do say okay to the division into a secular sphere that's run on one set of principles and a religious sphere that's run on a different set of principles. And that starts going into practice in the 1600s in some places, but by the mid 1700s, it's basically gone into practice everywhere. But if you notice, it begins with this. There's no other way to put it. It's just magical thinking, right? It's literally a magician making these philosophical arguments. It begins with a magical understanding where the nature of things is flexible, and we have access to it by means of our will, right? So we can change the kind of creature we are. We can change what species of creature we are by means of having the right of getting the right knowledge and of applying the right pressure, of applying the right power. It's in it. So it's really a matter of will and expertise on the ability to change out our species. Right? So you see this magical thing. So instead of saying our job is to come in line with the kind of creature we are and do that well, right? Be the best kind of human that we can be, right? Be the best kind of man we can be, the best kind of woman, the best kind of child, the best kind of adult, the best kind of the best version of the thing that we are. And that's what virtue is. Instead, we're supposed to grow into the kind of thing we can become whatever we want to become. Now, that's something that when you say to a kid, usually what people have always meant by that is, you can become a doctor, you can become a business owner, an electrician. You can, what thing do you want to do as the kind of species that you are, right? How do you want, what kind of human being do you want to be? Well, we can see the way that eventually the end of this rope, the end of this tether is what is actually thinking that by an act of the will, we can change our nature, right? I'm going to become a cat, right? Or a man becoming a woman, or a woman becoming a man, right? The end of this, the end of this way of thinking is that we can change our being, because our being is flexible, right? Our being is, but that is an assumption that our society has gotten from these. I mean, there were other people that have made similar arguments, but get from this kind of Florentine secular humanism that has its roots back here in Pico and Machiavelli. And as you trace it through, you can see a lot of even the major philosophical problems, the major social reorganizations, they all begin by assuming this, right? First you assume this, and then the French Revolution happens, right? Or first you assume this, and then you start buying into social Darwinism and eugenics and all sorts of things like that, right? Things that did actual real evil in the world, that killed a lot of people. Those things don't come out of nowhere. They come out of starting to believe that there isn't such thing as human nature, or a proper way for society to exist, a proper way to treat your neighbor because of the kind of thing that he is, right? If your neighbor is somebody made in the image of God, somebody who deserves respect, because by respecting them, you're respecting their creator, right? That there's a dignity to to being human. When you have that assumption, then you get a society organized in a particular way. When you have other assumptions, then something else has to come in and be the organizing principle, and it always turns out to be power, right? So when they moved away from a philosophical realism that says there's a proper nature and things should act a certain way as people, there's a right way to do things, there's a right way to organize society. And even amongst those that said there's a right way, they often said there's a multiplicity of right ways. There are different ways of organizing that honor the humanity in the citizens, that honor the humanity in the people that we find. Right? There's all different arguments about how is the right way to organize society. But when you get rid of that, you just get power, and that society is organized by power. And in those situations, the weak, the vulnerable always end up being taken advantage of, used, and discarded.